Well, Keir Starmer is a desperate Prime Minister in search of a good war,
Yeah.
knowing entirely well that it is a completely fake proposal. Keir Starmer knows completely well that you can't send some kind of raggle-taggle gypsy crew of willing volunteers from around Europe to go to Ukraine to, as he puts it, be peacekeepers, because there's no structure within which to do that.
Right.
Who would command them? What precisely is the mission? Troops don't just go out to a country and kind of operate randomly. It has to be under some kind of structure. And much as many EU member states might like it, and maybe Starmer himself might like it, there is no EU defence force. That's a project that was tried and failed for many, many years.
Hello, hello, you magnificent lot, and welcome back to the channel where we slice and dice the political circus with a proper British wit. Today we're diving headfirst into a mess that's as sticky as a jam jar, and we're talking about the Ukraine peace deal and the endless distractions of our very own Labour Party, led by none other than Sir Keir Starmer. And trust me, this isn't your average cup of tea. It's more like that overbrewed cuppa that leaves you wondering where all the milk went. This Ukraine aid has cost the nations involved roughly £350 billion, and Trump says all these money have gone down the drain instead of just focusing on peace.
Well, I think I'm really disappointed in what's happened. I've been watching this for 3 years. It's a war that would have never happened if I was president, and I've been watching these people being killed at levels that you've rarely seen, not even close, since the Second World War. And I'm very disappointed. I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago.
Now, before we get into it, let's set the scene. Picture this: high-level talks in the exotic sands of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov are having a talk behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Europe and Ukraine were left out in the cold like a dodgy kebab from a takeaway on a rainy night. It's a secretive meeting that smacks of the old clandestine clown convention where the audience isn't even invited to the show. And what's the big idea, you ask? Former Foreign Secretary William Hague has been ringing alarm bells louder than Big Ben on a foggy morning. Hague warned that a shambolic peace deal for Ukraine could backfire, yes, you heard that right, and spark a much bigger war down the line. Now let's pivot to the star of our show. No, not the glittering headliner in the centre ring, but our very own Keir Starmer and his Labour Party. It seems that while world leaders are busy trying to pen the next chapter of international diplomacy, Starmer is determined to give the UK a masterclass in misdirected priorities. Our leader is all set to jet off to the White House next week, where Ukraine will be the hot topic of conversation. But here's a thought. Why is Starmer so obsessed with playing international peacemaker when our own backyard is in need of a proper tidy-up?
Today's meeting in Paris was called by the French president after it emerged that European leaders had not been invited to peace talks between America and Russia, which could start as early as tomorrow, and strong hints that US support could be scaled back.
I think he wants to stop fighting. I see that. We spoke long and hard. Steve Witkoff was with him for a very extended period, like about 3 hours. I think he wants to stop fighting. They have a big, powerful machine, you understand that.
Britain and France have always seen themselves as America's closest allies in Europe. But after days of chaotic briefing by the White House, both are now pushing back against Washington.
Let's be honest, folks. While our country's social strata are buckling under the weight of soaring living costs, pensions cuts, crumbling infrastructure, and an NHS that's more patchwork than proper service, Starmer's busy making waves over in Washington. It's as if he's decided that fixing domestic problems is less important than ensuring the world sees him as a global statesman. One might say that our Labour leader is juggling too many balls at once and, spoiler alert, they're all bound to come crashing down like a dodgy high-wire act. Here, instead of focusing on what really matters, like getting a grip on the cost of living crisis, fixing the NHS, or ensuring decent wages for hard-working Britons, Starmer seems to be more interested in dabbling in international affairs. Look, it's all very well to promise global peace, but when the local community is suffering, you'd think our leader might roll up his sleeves and tackle the problems right here at home. Priorities, Keir, priorities. Let's not forget the irony of the situation. Labour, under previous leadership, once pledged to focus on the common man's issues. But these days it appears that our party's international ambitions have taken centre stage, much to the detriment of those struggling with real, everyday problems.
But there's still a reliance on a US commitment that under Trump may just not be there.
I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground alongside others if there is a lasting peace agreement. But there must be a US backstop, because a US security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again. In this moment, we have to recognise the new era that we are in, not cling hopelessly to the comforts of the past. It's time for us to take responsibility for our security, for our continent.
The idea of sending peacekeeping troops to Ukraine might make for dramatic headlines, but when the UK's own citizens are left scrambling to pay their bills and keep the lights on, one can't help but wonder, shouldn't Starmer be more concerned with fixing the leak in his own boat before trying to bail out someone else's sinking ship? Now, let's circle back to that alarming peace deal talk. The negotiations in Riyadh are being framed as the first step of a long and difficult journey by US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. And yet behind the scenes there's a palpable sense of trepidation. The discussions involve territory, security guarantees, and if you ask me, it sounds as convoluted as trying to understand the plot of a particularly muddled Shakespearean comedy. And then there's the ever-present spectre of Donald Trump, whose team is just trying to deliver on their promises, one of which was to end the war in Ukraine. Keir, take some example, mate. Deliver on your promises.
So Starmer knows this, or if he doesn't know this, then he doesn't even have the most basic grasp of international defence. And I think all he's trying to do here is do what this desperate Labour government does all the time, and get a headline for a day or two. And in that sense, it's worked, because he's got a headline which in a sense makes him sound tough and as if he's playing some kind of leading role. I'm ready to send troops. But it's all a complete fiction, isn't it?
Our dear Keir seems to have been seduced by the allure of international acclaim. Perhaps he believes that by being seen as a peacemaker on the global stage, he can distract from the fact that, at home, Labour's policies have repeatedly failed to deliver tangible improvements. It's the classic case of his smoke and mirrors routine.
For 3 years, the war in Ukraine has pitched Russia against the West. Now, for the first time, the British Prime Minister has explicitly said that he's prepared to deploy British peacekeepers in Ukraine. And he's expected to put pressure on European leaders to do the same at today's emergency summit in Paris. The Prime Minister said the UK has already committed £3 billion a year until at least 2030.
Now, I'm not saying that international diplomacy isn't important. Of course, peace and stability on the global stage matter. But here's the rub. When the Labour Party spends its time dabbling in international issues without first sorting out domestic concerns, it risks alienating the very electorate it claims to represent. Starmer should be focusing on solving problems at home, helping all who are struggling to make ends meet, rather than trying to play mediator in conflicts far beyond our shores. After all, if you can't get your own house in order, why on earth would you be meddling in someone else's? And let's not even start on the cost of sending peacekeeping troops overseas. Labour's idea of extending British influence in Ukraine might sound noble to some, but it smacks of a distraction, a way to divert attention from domestic failures. So, as the international negotiations continue and the risk of a bad peace deal looms large, potentially setting the stage for future conflict, we're left with a stark choice. Do we continue to allow our leaders to be dazzled by the allure of global politics, or do we demand that they focus on the here and now? The Labour Party, with its history of empty promises and circus-like antics, seems more intent on chasing international accolades than delivering for the people at home. And while the prospect of a grand peace deal in Ukraine might provide some temporary distraction, it does nothing to ease the daily struggles of the British public. So, my fellow Britons, it's time to ask ourselves, do we want our leaders to juggle hot potatoes on the global stage while our own problems go unsolved? Or do we demand that they get back to basics, fix the leaks at home before trying to patch up the world? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this romp through the latest political circus, do give us a like and subscribe for more no-nonsense proper British commentary. Until next time, keep your wits about you and remember the show may go on, but it's high time we change the script.